Fentanyl. That seems to be the word on everybody's lips these days when they talk about the drug epidemic we are facing right now in America. Did you know that over 150 people die every day due to fentanyl overdoses? It's said to be 50 times stronger than heroin and 100 times stronger than morphine. And according to the American Addiction Center, fentanyl is cheaper and easier to obtain than heroin. DEA Administrator Ann Milgram has said that fentanyl is the single deadliest drug threat our nation has ever encountered. Not only that, but the average age of the people dying from fentanyl overdoses is 33. These facts are terrifying, but we have to look at them in order to understand the dangers that young Americans are going through right now. Because the fentanyl crisis in America right now is the worst drug epidemic our country has ever faced. Today, I'm going to go over some disturbing facts about the dangers of fentanyl. I'm going to talk about what the risk factors are and ways you could spot a fentanyl addict. And lastly, I'm going to go over the reality of what fentanyl addicts have to go through in order to gain sobriety. So even though it was first developed in the late 1960s, fentanyl didn't become popular as a street drug until 2011. As I already pointed out, fentanyl is the most potent drug that's ever been dealt on these American streets. It's stronger than heroin, and it's easier to get. In fact, many drug dealers these days are using fentanyl to cut other drugs with because of the low cost of the drug. But just what is fentanyl? According to the DEA website, fentanyl is a synthetic opioid typically used to treat patients with chronic severe pain, and an opioid is a class of drug used to reduce moderate to severe pain. When it's dealt on the streets, it's usually made in labs in Mexico and smuggled into the United States to be sold here. The DEA also states that from 2020 to 2021, overdose deaths involving opioids rose 38.1%. Now, this is a trend that America has been seeing now for decades. In the year 1999, the amount of people who died in America due to drug overdoses was less than 20,000. Now, in 2020, that number is 91,799. As we can see, fentanyl is a very serious problem currently affecting our communities. But what are the signs and symptoms of someone suffering from a fentanyl addiction, and who is the most at risk of becoming an addict? As the case with all addictions, there is no one factor that creates an addict. It varies from person to person and is usually a combination of factors that combine to create someone having an addictive personality. Genetics plays a huge role in whether or not a person will become an addict. The APA states that at least half of a person's susceptibility to drug addiction can be linked to genetic factors, which means if you have a parent who is an addict, you are much more likely to become an addict yourself. A person's environment also plays a role in whether or not they will develop an addiction. A history of trauma, such as sexual, physical, or emotional abuse, can cause a person to seek out outside substances in order to help them cope. While with other drugs such as marijuana and alcohol addiction, who suffer from marijuana or alcohol addiction, it can be a bit harder to spot. Fentanyl addicts usually display clear signs of their habits if you know what to look for. Here are some of the symptoms of fentanyl addict: mood swings, isolation, fatigue, disinterest in former activities, money troubles, strained relationships, trouble at work, and anxiety, to name a few. Now that we know the reasons a person might become addicted and ways to spot an addict, I'm going to talk about some of the things most fentanyl addicts have to go through in order to kick their addictions. It can be very hard for an addict to get sober on their own, and it can also be quite dangerous. The length and intensity of the person's withdrawal period usually depends upon how long a person was taking the drug and the amount they were taking. People detoxing from fentanyl often experience fever, nausea, restless legs, anxiety, depression, diarrhea, insomnia, sweating, and much more. It is advised that when going through withdrawals, checks into a detox facility who can monitor the process and help ease them into that first stage of recovery. After a person is detoxed, it is usually helpful and often necessary for them to go to a rehabilitation treatment and or join a 12-step program where they can get the necessary tools they need in order to achieve long-term sobriety. With all the overdoses and reports of fentanyl-laced drugs, the drug epidemic in America is worse now than it's ever been. America is suffering right now, and no one really has the answer for solving all the problems this country is going through. The fentanyl crisis often gets overlooked because of the stigma that is against drug addicts. But with more and more young people suffering from the effects of fentanyl, we need to start paying more attention and coming up with solutions. The future of this country depends upon it.